Here we go, live. Hi,
Okay.
this is Mary MacCarthy. I am bringing you our first show, what's going to become a weekly show here on Hightouch called the Data Tea with Mary on Thursdays. I'm delighted to have as our first guest, Jessica Cherny. Hi, Jessica. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Mary. Really excited for this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the purpose of this show is really to feature interesting voices in the data space, whether that's new and emerging voices, established voices, creative, out there voices, anyone who's part of this discussion of all the things happening in the data industry. When I was trying to choose my first guest, several people mentioned you, Jessica, as somebody who's tuned into a lot of things. So I was like, I'm going to get Jessica on here. So let me introduce you, just give the bare bones introduction to Jessica. She is a senior data analyst at Ironclad. She's going to tell us what Ironclad does and more about what she does there. And she also is the founder of something called Data Angels, which we will also talk about a bit later in the show. Now, Jessica, we will dive into a bit of the numbers and the tools and technology of data. But for me, the modern data stack, the cornerstone of it is the people. If you don't have good people running it, building it first and then running it, it doesn't matter how good your tools and technology are, right? So in this case, that the people or the person is you. So I want to know more about you. Tell us some things that we should all know about Jessica Cherny.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm honored to be here and really excited. Yeah, a little bit about me is as you said, I was a one-woman data show at this digital contracts startup called Ironclad for the last 3 years. And I started that data function straight out of college. So that was a fun time. I'll go a little bit more into that. And then, yeah, I co-founded Data Angels, which is a Slack community for women in data. And then outside of, work and data things, I am from San Francisco. I grew up here. My parents immigrated here. And so that's a whole fun thing. And I'm a triplet. So I'm one of 3 girls, and they're my best friends. So that taught me also a lot of life lessons. So we can also chat about that. But yeah, just
Absolutely. I saw that on Twitter this weekend because you were celebrating your birthday, the 3 of you.
yes,
Happy
yes, I
birthday.
was. Thank you so
And it
much.
made me think, because that's such a unique way to grow up, being a triplet, it
Yeah.
made me think, was there something about that pushed her into data? Because you must see the world in a different way. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I feel like you can spin up any story about it, but like
True.
being in a triplet, being a triplet, you're always looking to your right and left of you and comparing yourself to others. And one of my sisters, Diana, she started to do this data science class when we were all going to school together at Berkeley. And I was like, maybe that's a good way to also a good class to take. And maybe I should get into data science as well. So I did actually get into data science because my sister took a class for it as well. But I'll go into that full story also later.
That's amazing. Absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. I'm not a triplet, so I cannot
Yeah.
relate, but I'm one of 6 siblings, and I know that growing up that way, resources are split 6 ways. There's like a sense of scarcity. So I feel like it gave me a perspective that carries with me to this day, those formative experiences. So, and for anybody who's watching from my family, not just a sense of scarcity, but also of abundance. There's a
Yeah.
lot of love when you have a lot of people around. That's amazing. So, you graduated Berkeley a few years ago, and then your first job was what many data people experience is you've studied data science, data analysis. You expect to go into this big company and be a cog in a machine, right? to start your career and learn from other people. And you had the opposite experience at Ironclad. You went in and you were the data team. So describe that for us.
Yeah, I mean, it was chaotic and rocket ship like all at the same time. It's been and it still continues to be amazing. Um, I can't tell you just how much professional and personal growth I've had working at Ironclad because one, when you're fresh out of college, you have no real tangible work experience besides your internships, and that's only like 10 to 12 weeks of actual work. So you've never had anything to really compare your work life to until it's your first job. I just was super gritty and just like dove into that startup life because okay, I saw this as the norm of doing things a certain way. In the startup, you have to wear a lot of hats, quote unquote. Things change all the time. Things aren't really documented. You're still figuring out best practices. You kind of have to elbow your way through a lot of things. So I just applied those skills that I learned in Berkeley, going to a big public school, and kind of also elbowing your way and for resources and being gritty. And I applied that to working at Ironclad. And the great thing about startups is that if you show your worth and value to the team, you're going to be known as, you're going to be thought of as a certain way, and then opportunity will come to you. Opportunity will be abundant to you. And I felt that for the last couple of years, and how every year I would get more and more responsibilities and get promoted up the ladder because there was so much opportunity to prove yourself and show value. So I never stopped. It's been like a mini MBA at Ironclad, because also when you work in data, you're exposed to data from every function, because, one woman data team, there's no like separate sales analytics, finance analytics, product analytics, or kind of have to do it all. So I learned about also the most important metrics for each team, and thought, okay, now I finally know what gross renewal rates are, product retention, ARR. I was like, all these things that were very mysterious to me suddenly became not so much. So yeah, it's been.
So you got this incredible perspective on,
Yeah.
and a perspective that would apply certainly outside of startups,
Yeah,
once
and
you know what those
yeah,
different business stakeholders are doing and what they need.
yeah, and you're being asked the most important business questions too, like, what does our marketing ROI look like? What should we do with pricing? What does product retention look like? So these are all very relevant questions, and not just, I don't know, run-of-the-mill questions that aren't going to change the business necessarily or move that needle. They definitely move that needle.
Oh, yeah. So in those very early days, though, was it sort of like in a single day or a single week, you are one day a data analyst, one day a data engineer, and then another moment a data scientist? Is that kind of how those
No,
roles play out?
I was mostly only data analyst for the
Mhm.
majority of my time at Ironclad still. I'm now doing a little bit of data engineering now that I'm in the analytics engineers class or club. Shout out that class. You should all look at it, and analyticsengineers.club, I believe.
Yeah,
Run
we
by
can put it in the link afterwards. I've
Yeah,
taken
yeah.
the course. Yeah.
It's great. And then I did some data science work also, but really the most foundational thing that was needed was just plain old analytics. Like, we have this data, or, what data do we need to answer this business question? Not anything like super predictive using fancy ML models. It was just like, what's the most understandable thing that you can rum up with data and show to your stakeholders and make a quick decision out of it?
Absolutely. So now the team has grown at Ironclad. First of all, before we talk about the team there,
Yeah.
tell us what Ironclad does more specifically. It's
Yeah.
contract
Yeah.
lifecycle management?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, which is
Um,
what?
It is a place for all of your digital contracts to live. So think about any NDAs you close as a business, or order forms that you send out if you're an enterprise SaaS business, or offer letters. You need somewhere to store all of your contracts and create those contracts and negotiate those contracts. So it's an all-in-one contract platform for in-house legal teams. So we sell to customers like Snapchat, they're a happy customer, Coinbase, L'Oreal. So yeah, it's legal ops, legal teams, and sales teams mostly using our product.
Yeah, and I know you guys are doing phenomenally well, and part of that is that's one of the reasons that now you're no longer the data team, but you're part of a
Yeah.
team. So, how did that feel, that evolution? Was it like, "Oh, now I can actually dig into the work more because I'm supported?"
Yeah, it's awesome. I really love how our team has grown in the last 6 months even. We finally have leadership, we have a director of analytics, we have other data analysts, and each one of us brings something new to the table. We all learn from each other. So somebody's better maybe at SQL writing, others more better at like planning and project managing, another person might be more technical. So we all like help each other out. And learn from each other. And yeah, we do split kind of the tasks that I used to just all do by myself. So we can each now focus on like interesting, yummy questions to answer with business, with data, and then focus maybe less on the less glamorous stuff. What's been also great is that our director of analytics, Stephanie, she's new also, or relatively new. She started in November, I believe. She's been really like honest about like saying no to the things that don't have a high ROI. And me, I'm still working on this. I have a hard time saying no. So I just try to people please and say yes to all the things that I'm asked to do, but that's not necessarily the best use of the team's time. So I'm getting better on actually having agency to focus on, again, the most critical data work.
That's so important, yeah,
Yeah.
and if you have higher ups who can do that pushing back for
Yeah.
you, it's the best,
Yeah.
absolutely. So as a data person outside of Ironclad, looking in at your business, I would think, like every data team, you have the same priorities in terms of making sure the data is you're getting the right data and that it's being leveraged for the right people and in a timely, cost-effective manner, all of those things. But I would think, given that contracts are your bread and butter, that security might be like even a top priority beyond all
Yeah.
of that. You cannot have any breaches. Is that sort of always on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually on the minds of our chief information security officer. He thinks a lot about SOC 2 compliance, and I mean, with as you sell more and more into enterprise clients, there that is the biggest top of mind thing that they're asking also. And so Ironclad has been investing a lot on that as a platform. And as far as the data team, we're still at a small, like we're still small enough where we're still figuring out all of our compliance. We're just setting up our EU databases that are separate from our North America so that, data can be GDPR compliant. So it's always a work in progress, I believe. But yeah, I
Right.
mean, we have
Always changing those
pseudo
damn
controls. Yeah,
GDPR regulations, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So I mean, we definitely are. We do sensitive information training. We definitely try not to like use our data in any malicious way. So there's a lot of trust there that and training that we try to do. But again, work in progress. So
absolutely, always. So if you had a magic wand and you could, the work you go in and do every day,
mhm.
as a senior data analyst, and you could say, I have this tool that doesn't exist now, or this process. Is there some like piece of the stack that either is missing for you or that could be dramatically improved?
So this is a hard question because we're still modernizing our data stack and we are just at the beginning of onboarding tools like onto Tableau and DBT. We previously have used other tools, but I think DBT is going to be pretty transformational for us. Fivetran
Mhm.
has been, and we've been customers of them for maybe like 6 months now, and we're finally just like seeing the value as we add more and more data engineers to our team, and it becomes more socialized. If I had a magic wand, I mean, it would be something maybe like Looker, but without having to write LookML.
Mm.
That's something that kind of scared me when I was looking at it as a one-woman data team, and before I had any data engineers, it's like, huh, how am I gonna make these models in Looker if I don't have a full-time data engineer helping me out with this? Because you have to write all of your modeling in a separate language called LookML, and you have to make sure the data is nicely modeled. So I believe a tool like DBT could help with this. And the big thing, I mean, the reason why we're trying to have something like a Looker or Tableau is data self-service. If I could have every person at my company be like very data literate and ask the right data questions about, hey, what does this aggregation mean? Or like, oh, does this data mean what I think it means? That would be the magic wand I would wave is data literacy as opposed to the tooling as much.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and from teams that I've seen, sometimes it's just certainly the data literacy, absolutely, but
Yeah.
if you just had more people, like
Yeah.
there's a reality of there's not enough people to keep up with all the work that needs to be done in data
Yeah.
departments. So, wave your magic wand and bring in a couple more staff members. Do you find, since it's a great perspective that you have, that because you've been in one place for a few years, and people move around a lot these
Mhm.
days, as you know. Um, do you find that on the business side that the people you work with have developed that data literacy over time?
Yeah, I mean, now that we're building out our finance org, it's actually uh, a lot of former finance and sales analytics people. So they have a lot of experience with the nitty-gritty of data.
Mhm.
Um, but when you're working with customers or people that aren't as technical internally, um, it's hard for them to ask questions on what is even possible with the data because they don't know the ceiling of what is possible with what we can measure. So, and that's not their fault. That's not anyone's fault. It's just like, you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's a mixed bag.
Absolutely. Um, Data literacy. is that something that you're kind of trying to do consciously, or like each time you work with someone, you learn from them, they learn from you about data, you learn about what they're doing, or have you seen or enacted specific ways of helping people become more data literate?
Yeah, I haven't done anything too active. I mean, a couple of examples is when I do hand off a project, I walked our stakeholders through the deliverable and be like, okay, here's what this means. Here's this time series and what it means and how it was defined. And then there was a growing need of, or I guess a growing desire of a lot of people at Ironclad to even understand my data workflow. Like, what is SQL? How do you write SQL? What is Data Studio? How do you visualize the data? So I led a little class on that, 5 different classes once a week on Fridays. I would teach.
Internally.
Yeah, internally, I would
Awesome.
train people,
Yeah.
and there was a Slack channel, and I would upload my recordings, so I'd be like, "Okay, when you're asking me about certain data and data questions, this is what I see. I see a bunch of data sources, and how do you make magic out of all those data sources? How do you write the code? How do you visualize the data?" Just so that they can have empathy and see, how it's done and also learn something along the way, so
And
that's
what
only
was
a
the by the way, you're raising the bar for all of us because we're all gonna have to go and do these things within our within our own companies. But what was the reception? Like, because
It was interesting. So there was a lot of interest to do the class. I think like 30 something people signed
Mhm,
up, but only like 5 would show up regularly. And maybe, I mean, I uploaded it and recorded it, so maybe
mhm.
people have a lot busy schedules. They may have watched it at the end. So it was a lot of interest, but not as much as follow through on all of the lectures. But I didn't mind as long as at least one person learned something new. I was happy.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, 5 people, that's huge if
yeah,
you've, helped them understand and even dive into some of the SQL. I find that
yeah,
people other than compared to other types of coding, SQL's very approachable,
yeah,
and it's a good
yeah.
way for non-technical people to kinda dive into some of this stuff, so,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
very rewarding, and I was trying to get more women to be unafraid to dive into that. I'm like, "Okay, I got you, like, this isn't as scary or gatekeepy as it's made out to be." So, yeah, I tried to encourage
Absolutely.
people.
Yeah, well, that gets us to, Data Angels, which and by the way, I took the data T literally, and I've
Yeah,
gotten
I have my water, but I don't
okay.
have tea.
We'll send you a Hightouch mug, and next
Yeah.
time you join us,
Mhm.
you can have some tea.
Thank you.
Um, so Data Angels is a Slack community that you founded,
Mhm.
with what purpose?
Yeah, so I mean, as a one-woman data team at Ironclad, I found that in my early months while being there, I was constantly looking like, what does good look like? I don't really know. My manager was a VP of product. I didn't have any senior data analysts to learn from. And my manager, she set me up with a couple of one-on-one coffee chats with her former colleagues who are data science managers, and just so I can ask them questions about best practices, advice they would give, just picking their brain type of thing. So I met with 3 of them, and it was really interesting, and I thought, I should do this myself because it's not that hard. So I started messaging people on LinkedIn, mostly women, because I just feel more comfortable reaching out to women than I do for men, especially when I was young and less confident in myself. Um,
Mhm. That's an
and
important
women
point to say. It
Yeah,
really is because there can be so many different ambiguities when you're
yeah.
yeah, when you're a woman. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
go
then
ahead, I
just,
cut you
yeah,
off.
understanding more it's a male-dominated field. So I began reaching out, I began collecting my, mentors. I started taking notes down and making kinda like a little repository of things I've been learning from these calls, and I thought, "Okay, I've talked to these people very formally in, like, a Zoom. I emailed them. How do I follow up and keep that relationship warm, in a um in an informal way. And I thought, okay, a Slack group would be great if I could just message all the people that I know and all the women in data and just keep learning from them. And at the same time, I knew that a bunch of my colleagues, fellow women in data that I graduated with, they also felt the same, that they were trying to learn from more folks that are senior than them in the data world. So I started Data Angels from that need for myself and from my peers. And we hit like really good, I guess, product market fit because a lot of people wanted to join this community, and there's not really a space for just like generally all women who are interested in data, who are in data, who have been in data. There've been groups that I've seen that is like women in ML, R
Mhm.
ladies, women in Python, but there wasn't anything super broad and super kind of like just casual. So I started dating angels in August 2020 with my sister who is also in data. And I've kind of just taken the reins on that and tried to grow it. We're now at a little over 650 women, and we do monthly
Yay.
events. And I constantly try to collect more and more people through events to just, broadcast Data Angels in a new light. So it's been really rewarding. The biggest thing we wanted I told myself when I started, I was like, if just one person got a job from another data angel, that would be enough. And there have been
Yeah.
many times of that happening, and notes traded, interview buddies, support groups, and it's been really rewarding. I love it. It's like my second job, but it
Oh,
doesn't.
I love it. I think, well, bravo to you and your sister
Thank
for
you.
having the insight to do that and you being willing to give your time, um, so young. I think maybe you obviously, have done so well professionally, and, to share that with other people early on in your career is huge. Um, and I was thinking about this today before the show, how, you'll I'm older than you. Later on in your career, all that mentorship and fellowship among women is equally, if not more important, because then, now you're dealing with all the stress of starting your career and building it up. But then in 5, 10, 15 years, it's the stress of if you choose to have a family and child rearing and all those things that are not easy to balance with any career, certainly with these high powered, competitive careers where you always have to be learning on the side and studying, and it's very hard to balance all of that. When I became a mother, I didn't reach out to coworkers. I was in a different industry. I was in media where there wasn't that sense of fellowship. Since I came into data, I've been really pleasantly surprised
Yeah.
by other women that there's not, maybe because there's so many opportunities, people aren't like, trying to hang on to their spot. They're welcoming to other people. But I will join Data Angels and
Yes, come out. Let me introduce you to the Data Angels family. I'll get your
oh,
email after. And anyone in this chat, if anyone is interested in joining, just DM me on LinkedIn or Twitter.
yeah.
I always say network before you need it. It's the most
Mhm.
valuable advice I've ever, one of the few valuable, or a lot of valuable advice I've gotten over the years, but this one really stands out is don't network until you need a job. Network and build up that community. And then it'll pay dividends later once you've created those relationships authentically.
Right, it's one of the most important skills. So, obviously, in the training you did, a lot of us do, there's, you learn the analytics, you learn the data science, you learn the tools, you're always learning the new tools, but there's also this discussion going on about, this growing realization that people need the soft skills, which I don't like
Mhm.
that term because it kind of implies that they're less important.
Mhm.
But networking is certainly one of them. Um, what are the other, you know, s for lack of a better term right now, we'll come up with a better term.
Yeah,
What are the other so-called soft skills that you would like to see either, like, in data people coming into a business or that you would have liked to have when you first started?
yeah. I think effective and structured project management is
Huh.
really important. I think part of the reason why I was progressing a lot in my career at Ironclad is because I'm really structured and I can make structure from ambiguity. And when we have a complex data or business question or problem we want to answer with data, how do you create that structure? And for me, it's gathering or making a spec, um, getting the right people in the room, outlining how you want to break down a really complex problem into nice, achievable chunks. How do you ask the right questions from the stakeholders? If it's on a topic you don't even know anything about, how do you know, chip away at this big ambiguous thing? How do you coordinate with your teammates? How do you deliver on that project with a nice turnaround time and socialize it and tell a story about your impact? So doing that whole life cycle and if you have it really tight, is such an important skill. And I think,
That's fascinating. I haven't heard it said in that way. Um, have observed that in data teams, yeah, that's not necessarily the way people think, that, data people across the board are brilliant, right? But, sometimes the ones who are super, super technical are better at seeing the trees, but not the
Yeah,
forest.
of course. Exactly.
So maybe
Exactly.
building into the education and training that pulling
Yeah,
back and sometimes even asking, "Why are we doing this? Is this worth doing in the first place?" Right?
exactly. Exactly. I was gonna say something about
The other skills, the other kind of soft skills are related.
yeah, I mean the story like oh, I remember what I was gonna say. It's you have to work loudly.
Work loudly.
Yeah,
Huh.
I think socializing your work and storytelling effectively about it is also something that's gonna build your brand within your work space, within your company, and also,
Right.
you know, abroad or past, your
Yeah.
workplace. And I think writing about your work via a blog or Twitter or
Mhm.
LinkedIn, I think that's really important just so people all
Yeah.
know what you're working on, what you're good at, what keeps you passionate. So,
And I
um,
think we are still, as women, socialized to not do that as much or to
yeah, you have to go against that
Mhm.
kind of fear that you're gloating, and you should stand up for the work that you did because it is awesome. And I actively try to fight against that like socialization that we shouldn't, and we will be perceived a certain way if we do. But I tell my coworkers, I'm like, and especially my female coworkers, I'm like, you gotta stand up and own your value and talk about it and demand the respect, the compensation, all of that. So
All of
be
it,
unafraid.
yeah. Be unafraid. I should be writing these down, talk loudly. I'll go back and take
Yeah.
notes afterwards. No, they're all absolutely so important. I know that, you start on a team and, that's the key word is team, right? You have to go into a company being a team player, and all that is so important. And for me, in my career, I've struggled with, being a really good team player, but
Mhm.
sometimes that means, like, I would always be putting the credit, or giving
Yeah,
credit to other people without and I'm learning to take the credit as well, because
exactly.
it's important for the work you do. It's important for the progression of your career. I'm glad you mentioned money. I do tell women as much as possible to negotiate their salaries. Don't be afraid, um, and that money is really important.
It
Like,
is.
I really oppose any discourse that sort of, we do our jobs because we love them and sure, of course we do. That's great. We're lucky to have the privilege to do things that we love, but
Mhm.
ultimately, it's an exchange of of our labor and skills
Yeah.
for a paycheck. And yeah, men are much more comfortable talking about that.
Yeah, it has to make sense. You have to have those conversations with other women in your circle, be like, money shouldn't be a taboo subject. It should be something that is, talked about so you know what your worth is, and you can compare it. And yeah, I mean, have high women in your life and in your tribe that will be like, hey, think about this, Jessica. Would a man ever say this? Or would a man ever
Mhm.
have these insecurities? A man would never balk at asking for a raise, or these things that you kind of help you zoom out, and you're like, yeah, you're right. Like it's really helpful to have women in your tribe like that support you and help you up, even when you're a little bit scared for yourself. Um, it's helpful to have supportive women in your group like that.
And I've seen in a growing number of men who are saying that too and encouraging it. So I feel
Yeah,
like
it's amazing to have allies. I'm lucky at Ironclad where I do, and all the um, male managers that I've had in my time here, there've been three. Um,
Mhm.
they've all been super supportive and have made me
Great.
feel
Yeah.
comfortable in asking for my worth, and as long as I show my value, which I have. So
Of course. Yeah. I
all the
love it.
managers at Ironclad so far have been really helpful, and I can only wish the same on all the data folks out there. So.
Yeah. One last question. What's next for you? Obviously, you're happy at Ironclad, but like in, 10, 20 years, would you want to be a CTO, a
Yeah.
chief data officer?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'd wanna be a chief data officer.
Yeah.
We'll see. I mean, so far into the future, roles might change, same with titles, but something high up there, technical, looking at the big strategy picture of,
Yeah.
how data can help a business, generally in that area, but some position of
Awesome.
power and leadership, so
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being our first
thank you.
guest. This was
Yeah, of
amazing.
course, this is
Um,
awesome.
We, as part of the Hightouch values, we partnered with the Women in Data. So for
Mhm.
every show, we're giving a $250 donation in the guest's name to Women in Data, which is a great organization that I'm going to introduce you to them, and we'll maybe do an event together or something.
Sure.
Um, and yeah, we are thrilled to have you, and we'll have you back. Maybe
Thank you so
we'll do
much.
another show someday talking about what exactly a chief data officer does, because if that's
Of
what you
course,
aspire
yeah.
to, maybe we can help define it, right?
Of course. It's been
Okay.
a pleasure, Mary. It's been
Have a
awesome.
great
Thank
day.
you to the Hightouch team.
Cheers.
Bye.